everyone, welcome to the horror show. I'm Cecil, Laird.
Kristopher.
You got Jaime and Fuego here. Long days and pleasant nights to all you Hail to Stephen King homies that are tuning into this live. It was originally supposed to be a live panel at Phoenix Comic Fest, and it's apparently now Phoenix Fan Fusion. I can't even keep track of this anymore, Square Egg, but we're stoked that you are tuning in either live right now or on, just a little replay action here. So if you have any comments, inquiries, myself and Marsha are going to be keeping an eye on those, and we're going to make this as interactive as possible. But we are obviously here for the 35th anniversary of what I think is the scariest thing Stephen King ever wrote. He thinks so too. There are differing opinions. Some people say The Shining. Some people say, I don't know, maybe Carrie or Christine or Salem's Lot, I don't know, Misery maybe, but for my money, and in his introduction to the book, his little foreword that he did a number of years later, he was like, there's a reason I locked this book in a drawer and let it sit there for years. I think it's more so because it was so personal as far as the story goes, drawing inspiration from his own life and his own family and worst case scenario kind of situation. But we are here to celebrate all things Pet Sematary. So we're going to talk about the novel, which it's not till September, I think, that it's either September or November that it celebrates the proper 35th anniversary. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the amazing audiobook that came out just this past year, Michael C. Hall, right, Marsha?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dexter, dude. And we're also going to delve into both films a little bit, including the sequel. Maybe we'll just laugh about that one. And the upcoming remake from the Starry Eyes directors that I'm actually quite stoked about. So I guess we can, so all of us in this particular panel have either read the book or listened to it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Nice. So we're all on an even playing field this time. I think Cecil is the most recent to get acquainted with the source material for this. And so I want to throw the pitch to you, man. Just toss the pass since it's basketball day.
I'm actually glad you did. Now, just so you guys know, we have to kind of project for the live stream. The mics will pick us up fine, and I can bring the audio down if I need to. But don't fear projecting towards that way.
Don't fear projecting.
This was actually, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember if there was another one, but this might be my first full Stephen King book ingestion. I attempted to read it a long time ago, and I don't know if I actually attempted the book or if I was just shown the book by a friend, because I did read the gangbang scene, and that's not until towards the end,
That's
right?
like at the end.
So yeah, I think it was just a friend showing it to me.
You just picked that scene.
No, I think I was shown
I'm
that scene.
It's actually framed on the wall over there.
It is actually, yeah. It's something to strive for, is what's written about it. No, I was shown that, and so I was like, wow, that's messed up. This would be interesting to read. I don't think I ever actually, in fact, I know I never got around to reading it. And so I've read Stephen King comic iterations, but I've never read one of his books. And so I did start with Pet Sematary because I recently discovered the wonder of audiobooks. And when I read...
They've been around for a while.
I know. But I recently discovered them.
And also, Stephen King loves audiobooks. He talks highly about them constantly. He's like, you can zone out with a book, but you can't escape an audiobook. I disagree with him about that.
What's the guy's name who read most of the Dark Tower books? And he was in a motorcycle crash.
Oh yeah.
And Stephen King actually started a fund.
Yeah, he didn't get to do the last couple
nice to do his name
because of it. Yeah.
Honestly, I agree with you, Fuego. I think it's to me, there were many times that I found myself going back, because my mind wandered at one point. Now, I don't know if that's because of the book or because it was the situation I was in and just I was distracted by stuff. I found myself listening to it mostly when driving to and from jobs for my day job. So I got through it in about 2 weeks. But I will say that I now see why so many people are not fans of the representations of King that are put on screen, because so much character development needs to be cut out in order to actually put it up in some sort of, justifiable cinematic way.
And this isn't even one of his longer ones, which is what's crazy.
No, it's not. But there was still so much that was cut out, because I watched the movie again after reading the book. And I was like, damn, there's so much that was kind of just left out of this. I can only imagine what happened with It or The Stand or anything like that. But it also signified to me why King is as popular as he is. While it was not a scary book to me by any stretch of the imagination,
There's a few moments, but
not for me though. There wasn't any for me. I was interested and I liked how the story was crafted. I liked the divergences that he had at the times he had it when he was developing certain things. I liked how he had scary scenes laid out, but they just weren't scary to me. This subject matter has never been scary to me. Pet Sematary, I remember watching as a kid, did not scare me, even though I heard so many people.
Even Zelda?
No, nothing scared me.
If I can ask, what is a book that scared you?
I mean,
reading a book, like what is something that actually legitimately frightened you?
My books were more, you know, the summer reads, the Megs and, you know, the creature books, the Peter Benchley kind of stuff. That didn't necessarily scare me either. I guess I'd have.
They're not good.
No. I mean, they're fine. They're summer reads, but they're not meant to be scary. They're meant to be more adventure-ish. But I guess I have yet to read anything that's not true. I've read some short stories. I've read a couple of horror books on like my Kindle. But still, there's times in which there's things that get my skin to crawl and get my hair on end, but this didn't at all.
Okay.
But I appreciated it for what it was, though. I will say, again, I now see why people love King, because it was very meticulously crafted and it brought you into the character for sure, and it was really interesting to see how it played out. But I guess it's just the subject matter of the story didn't get me. I'm very intrigued to go back and do different King audiobooks, but you know,
Don't do the stand.
Don't do the stand. Okay.
No, I just
Fair
got
enough.
them doing that. We'll juggle between that and reading it. But,
They're the ones that Mayor Winningham has done. She's done some excellent stuff.
Okay.
Stephen King. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, I'm willing. I like the fact that he really goes super deep and builds his world in his books. And now, having listened to this, and it was what 13, 14, 15 hours long. Now I see like how much they had to have cut out of all the King representations that I watched. Like, I really love The Night Flyer. I'm sure. Well, that was a short story anyway, though, right?
Yeah.
But some of the longer ones, like I thought, like felt like truncated versions of stories, and now I can really see why. So anyway, that's a really long way of saying I dug the hell out of it. Really.
Dirk, how about you, man? When did you first read this, by the way?
Well, I listened to it.
Okay.
The
You
new
did-
audiobook.
this was
I got it
recent.
actually the first day it came out because they kept promoting it, and I had a free credit for my Audible subscription. So I was just like,
on too.
That's how I did it too.
so I was like, hey, I'm gonna check this out, and yeah, I loved Michael C. Hall's like reading it because he did voices and I think he did Jud really well.
His Jud was
not bad job,
dude. I think his Jud was better than Fred Gwynn's Jud. Honestly, I really liked it way better.
But the thing that how I first saw Pet Sematary was the movie and how I knew about it. But and after listening to the book, yeah, it is a bummer some of the things that they left out. I understand why they left it out.
It was King that left them out because he scripted them.
Yeah, but I think that there was a way better way of why Jud ended up telling Lewis about the Pet Sematary with Lewis saving Jud's wife and they left all that out of the movie and so I felt like
She wasn't in the movie at all.
I know.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a bummer thing because I felt like that gave a reason why Jud told Lewis.
That was more so the doorway though, because I love how you give his motivation for just having this secret he wants to tell somebody so very badly, and he's just itching, looking for a reason, looking for a window of opportunity. And
well, I think he almost felt obligated because he knew that Lewis's little girl wasn't gonna deal with the death of Church very well, and she kept talking about how that maybe Church might die from that road, and then the mother, she didn't want to deal with death at all, and so that's why Jud felt obligated in a sense, but
I
but
don't
I
think he
think
felt obligated at all.
Yeah.
I thought it was the cemeteries, the evil, the presence of the cemetery, that talked him into doing it, because he's been
Speaking
said
through
it
him.
right.
Yeah.
He said it a bunch of times once he'd gone there once. It has his power over
yeah
it.
later. but-
And I don't think he struggled really hard because he didn't really want to, but something was telling him to.
I think that's why he showed
it-
them the
it
pet
wasn't-
cemetery in
yeah.
the first place, and
Yeah,
But maybe in that moment of trauma,
Mhm.
he was weakened enough to where
Right.
maybe that voice was in his head, but he was ignoring it. But when
Well, Lewis did
that
save
happened,
his
he was able-
wife, so I
True.
feel like it was his way of saving the cat and then
Mhm.
saving the grief. So
And I think it was the
it's a-
justification
yeah.
of it. I don't think it was. It was how he was able to justify it, because they even talk about how the power it has over you
Right.
makes you rationalize telling the next person, even though you know it's going to happen.
Mhm.
You know it's not going to end well, and you rationally will think, no, I can't do this. However, I'm going to do it because I can justify it in the ABC, and that carries out through the whole book. Which I'm sorry to jump in, but
no.
Yeah.
I think it was the wife was a justification to telling, but I don't think he actually believed he was doing the right thing, and
Right.
he was hoping he was doing the right thing.
Yeah,
I
he
don't
was
think
hoping,
believed
and
he
that's why
was.
in hindsight he realized he didn't. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's kind of the horror of the whole story. Is like
Mhm.
it was all of the horror that happens is because of the best intentions.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the
Like-
road to hell, paved
Yes,
and all
it's-
that.
everything he was trying to do was for the best to help people's feelings, but they were going for the worst.
No.
Sure.
Dirk, any other thoughts and stuff about it? I mean, maybe a particular sequence that you thought was, I mean, maybe something obviously that wasn't in the
Well,
movie.
the ending was a lot different
Mhm.
in the book. Just how the forest when he was taking his wife up to the the Micmac burial ground, it's almost like it comes to life in a sense, like that there is a presence in this forest.
Wendigo.
Yeah, not mentioned really much at all in the movie.
Yeah, but there is a weird scene in the movie where like it's like this floating head.
The
that
face that comes out of the rock. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was weird.
Yeah, so there is that, but and that doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah,
like, it
it's the
just
closest
kind of
you
happens.
get to like
But
floating ram head, whatever
You
it
do
is.
get to see like trees falling down
Mhm.
in the movie, which was interesting. So that I felt like, oh well, there is kind of like a presence, but like
Mhm.
they don't go into as much detail as the book does, of course. And so I don't know. I liked all that stuff. I liked the neighbor that goes and checks on him, and then like hearing the backstory about how afraid he was
Mhm.
once he found Lewis like holding his wife and
Mhm.
everything, and like just how he wasn't even like a person anymore. He was just like he was almost like he's like feeding the burial ground now with these bodies and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
And
His
it's-
hair had turned completely white. too.
Yeah.
So,
And yet that guy was kind of charmed for a second too, and he's like, follow him, and he does. And then remember as he starts to doubt, because it had enough energy from Lewis at that point or whatever, and he didn't believe and wasn't being led directly, and he falls down on the,
Mhm.
yeah. And then,
so.
I'm trying to remember the name of it. Crazy, come on, Marcia, give us those main terms.
The downfall.
The
What?
down for,
What was the logs?
no, they have something, they have some particular name for the stack of all the trees and
Lobster
brush and
roll.
I
stuff
thought they
like
called
that.
it the downfall.
Maybe the downfall.
I thought that's what they called it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't
Oh,
remember
anyway.
what he called it
Yeah.
specifically.
Well, Kristopher, man, what was your first experience with this? Was it the movie, or did you happen, since I know you said, there were Stephen King books lying around and stuff, did you encounter the book first?
Yes, I think it was the book first.
Okay.
This was one that was, as I said in the panels, if you were at Comicon, there were Stephen King books around the house growing up. My dad was a big fan. I wasn't allowed to read them, but I would literally take other books out and slip them into the covers, and then hide them under my bed and read them.
Nice.
I think this was the first one. This
Wow,
was
this is your first.
I
Stephen King
believe
book.
so.
Wow.
Yes.
This was the
Wow,
first one
a
that I read
heavy one
too.
to start.
Because of the cover with the scary cat.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's just like, oh, I need to read this one specifically.
Yeah.
yeah. So
That'll
I
do
think,
it.
and I was maybe I don't know 7 or 8 at that point.
Oh wow.
Reading this
Yeah.
book, yeah.
Dang.
Barely getting through it,
Well,
probably.
that's interesting because I mean it's just such a deep,
Yeah.
meaningful story. Just at that age, you were able to like kind of grasp like the whole.
No.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
literally
not at all.
getting through it. Just the fact, like the words themselves were naughty to be reading.
Right.
I'm not supposed to look at this,
Yeah.
and so it was scary in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I read it years later, and it still had a lot of that depth to it
Mm-hmm.
from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I think it holds up as it's a perfect like Stephen King encapsulate. It's a good starter Stephen King. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yeah.
If you want to introduce someone to Stephen King,
Yeah.
this is a good one. This is a boiled down campfire story.
It's not super long either.
Yeah, it's not that
Yeah.
long.
No.
It's I mean it's long for most authors. I think.
It's not Stephen King long.
Right.
Not Stephen King long.
It was
which
only
is
like
especially
14 hours, right, on
Yeah.
Audible. So
Compared to what, like 40 something hours?
I've
had-
had,
yeah,
40
it's
hours.
like
Yeah, yeah.
43, 45,
Mhm.
43, I think, for this.
But it doesn't tie
And
into
then
like
47%.
the Dark Tower series that much.
It may not tie into the
It's-
Dark Tower, but this was 83, and this was when it was like Reference City for him. There's a Cujo reference in there.
There is, yes.
They mention Haven, which is where the Tommyknockers would take
Mhm.
place later on.
It isn't
There's a
Bangor,
dairy mention. This one was in Ludlow, actually, which
Ludlow,
is the
okay.
same place that they did. Boy, I've got it here somewhere in my notes. Boy, I honestly want to say Bag of Bones, maybe, or actually, no. It's on the tip of my tongue.
It was
Dark-
based. It was
Dark
based on
Path.
Bangor, though,
Well, based on the city in
right? City,
Bangor,
yeah,
or at least
Louisville,
Derry. I mean, at least Derry was. I don't know about Ludlow, for instance, but I mean, hey, it's the expanded little Kingverse. This is when he was really starting to craft it and build it. This is one of his most reference-heavy books, from what a lot of people say. So.
Yeah.
No Dark Tower
so
tie-ins,
he was
though.
working. He was working at the university then, and at a road. Like it was literally from him working as a professor at the university, and he was at a house like next to a road, and he was afraid of his kids.
It
Like
was exactly what the
it
story
was
is.
exactly the story, except for in the story that they lose their son.
The
And,
worst case scenario that he envisioned and that
Mhm.
almost happened actually happens.
yeah, they even
Yeah.
have the Pet Cemetery is even there.
It was a real place.
Yeah, and just the spelling of it is like really stuck with him, and then it carried over into the book. So.
Well, it was his daughter that lost her cat too.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah, that he
Mhm.
mentioned let God get his own cat,
Yeah.
not mine. That
Mhm.
was something his daughter actually said. that
Yeah.
he put in the book.
Yeah.
And I was really happy that in the audiobook, because besides rereading it, I listened to the audiobook, and they have the foreword, which
Mhm.
popped up in the paperback edition, where he gives you so much insight into how personal this
Yeah.
story really was. I mean, honestly, worst case scenario, and he just rolled with it, man. And I think that's why he felt it was so dark and so evil, because so many Stephen King stories have that little shimmering, shine of light or something, a silver lining, I guess.
Yeah.
This one
is
doesn't
not.
have it.
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't have it at
No,
all.
It's super dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Marcia, I know that you just having a child and stuff, this
Mhm.
hit kind of close to home at certain points. You were like messaging us
Yeah.
and saying,
It got
I
really
need to
dark.
be consoled.
It got really dark real quick. For me, like I really wish I would have read this story, and I don't even think I've actually watched the movie yet. I still haven't watched the movie. I haven't.
Like ever?
No,
Oh,
like
wow.
I remember like pieces, like maybe flashes of like a trailer or preview or something I've seen. I have those in my memory bank somehow, but I don't think I've actually watched the full movie. So I really wish I would have consumed this story prior to having a kid, because I would have loved to know how I would have felt different.
Mhm.
Because reading it, knowing the story, I knew Gage was gonna die, and the little moments that he would have that kind of clarity of like this, something bad is gonna be happening. He would just hold Gage closer to him, and I would just freak out. I'm like, I can't handle this. This is so hard because he's gonna die, and he's a sweet little baby, and
So
it's just.
true.
You just feel for him, and it was terrifying as a mother with a kid, like getting close to that age, and just the thought of him like just being snatched from you so quickly, and just what would you do? Like, just you create this person, this thing that you love so much, just to realize. And I think this is what made it so deep for me, is like I was sitting there and I was like, oh my god, I just realized that I created something that will have to die some point, and I may there is a possibility I might have to live through that, and I got super depressed, and like I want to cry
I
just
got
thinking
depressed
about
too.
it. And
just thinking
and
about
just imagining Stephen King writing this and living it at the same time, and every time a truck would drive by and you just hear the run. Oh my God! I was like, this is tough. And every chapter was like, oh man, this Band-Aid's coming, and I just want to rip it off, like just rip it off. And then like you don't witness Gage's death until afterwards, and he relives it.
Yeah,
and
the way
oh
that
my
they framed it in the book was
God.
strange, wasn't it?
Very
In a good way, but
It
it
was-
was like
I thought
flashback
it was-
almost.
I think it was perfect because he reliving it as an afterthought. Because like if you think about it, instances that where your life changes, it's like it happens so fast and slow at the same time, and it takes time for your mind to register it. So it isn't until later until you can actually allow yourself to feel it. And when, oh my God, walking up and like you see his little baby hat and full with blood in his jumper, I was like, oh my God.
Well, and then like the shoes way over here,
Oh,
and the way they described the scene of
It
the
was
accident
so
was just
powerful.
heart wrenching.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
terrible.
Well, when he digs him up too, where he
Oh,
says that the head's
yeah.
not like barely connected and everything, and I was just like,
It's
man, this is brutal. And then when he puts him in the car, and then the police come, and then he's just like, oh my God, they're gonna see the child in the front seat
Yeah.
and everything,
And by that point, he's in full-on madness mode.
Yeah.
Basically.
Mhm.
So, and the descent into madness is probably what I find so disturbing about this book, because the one thing you couldn't have in the film was so much of this internal rationalization where he's trying to justify stupid, insane things to himself, and then he catches himself trying to justify it. So he is like moderately cognizant of what is happening in
But
his
again,
head.
going through something that's the most traumatic thing you can go through
Mhm.
as a human being is the death of your child.
Yeah.
And so you kind of give him an excuse. It's like, well, he went through the worst possible thing that could happen to you, basically.
Yeah.
And but he, obviously took a little part.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the way that they open the second portion, because the book is basically broken up into, you've got the you've got Pet Sematary at the beginning, you've got Micmac Burying Ground, and then the last is Oz the Waiting Tailor. But the way they open up part 2, where I honestly am so disappointed I didn't bring the book here, because my original intent for the panel was to read the first paragraph of part 2, where King basically talks about when people reach the breaking point of sanity and how they go from being fearful to almost just laughing about it, because there's this giddy acceptance of the madness, and it's almost like everything is feeling okay. If you push somebody so far, once they go over, once it's hey ho, let's go, that's it. You're past the point of no return, and you're pretty much fucked, I guess. So
Yeah.
I think that's also why this is, like I said, is a good beginner of Stephen King. Is this is a fear that lives in a normal human experience, is having a child. Most people have children,
yeah.
and the greatest fears built around that. What could that go to? How horrible can that become?
Well, and you're not supposed
And,
to bury your kids.
yes.
And the frame of thinking, it's the ultimate fear, but it's something that's not supposed to happen,
Yeah.
typically. So,
But he goes there. He takes those things that are just anxieties that are part of everyday life, and takes them to their absolute extremes.
Mhm.
yeah.
And he does it very well too. Even with the cat, and and you talking about the experience from Jud when he was a younger person, male. I don't know. He's a lad. He's a young lad, and his experience with the dad who lost his son to the war, and it just brought him right up there and brought him back, and he had to deal with that madness, knowing that happened, and he tried to tell Creed, like, don't do it, it's bad, I've been there. He still knows it's gonna happen.
And that's
He
to
knows
the
he's gonna
power
do
of the
it.
grounds, honestly,
Yeah.
like Chris was saying. I mean, it does have I think both of you were mentioning it, it does have, it is a presence, and it is a deep, ancient, evil presence, and
Mhm.
that's why one of
It
the
feeds on that human weakness, basically. It just
Yeah.
knows when you're at that weakest state,
Yeah.
when you're in a trauma state. That's when it comes into you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it almost made me wonder, like what Cecil hinted at about when you bury a body there, is the grounds this evil force, gaining power from putting bodies into it? Is it gaining some life force, some energy? Does it gain more the closer to death, when you're buried there?
Or does it gain from the people that are burying?
Yeah, or a little.
Because they're the ones that are really, suffering.
Yeah.
Does it gain from that suffering more than even the bodies that are being buried?
Yeah, seriously. If I'm just gonna jump through a few notes that I had here, it's interesting because you see how much more flawed Creed is in this, with so much of that internalization of whether it's, deeper rooted arguments and, hostility with her family, with his wife's family, also the fact that, oh goodness, he's short-tempered with the kids and in-laws and stuff. There's just weird forces of irony and coincidence even pulling them there, which is something I don't know if the movie even touched upon as much as that, of all the different jobs he could have taken, this was the one. And, just so many different conveniences, coincidences, living next to Jud. It does seem almost like predestined to some disturbing degree for them to end up there and for everything to go as terribly as it possibly could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the movie does, because I didn't watch it, but did they touch on the fact when Jud confronts Gage, the whole
That's
essence?
a bit that's changed, like, very much so, and
Because he confronts him, he's all like, you beat me once before, but you're not going to beat me this time, old man, and kills him.
it's very different in the movie, and I guess we can talk about that when we get to the movie. I was under the impression we had all seen the movie, so this will be interesting.
Mhm.
No,
to
I
get a little
can't.
bit
Like
when
I
we
said,
get to
I
your thoughts on
tried,
it.
and like I tried to skim it, and I'm like, I just can't, because like I didn't even get to the part where he gets hit by the truck. I can't. It's too much, and I want to watch the new one, so I'm gonna have to
We're gonna
watch
sit
it.
through it at some
Yeah.
point.
And I mean, just rip that Band-Aid off, but I'm
Yeah.
still recovering from the actual book, so.
Yeah, I just love all the different perspectives on death that we have in this book, and it's all about how people view it differently, they accept it and deal with it differently, especially in the long term. Because you've got Creed, he's besides being a doctor, he worked at the mortuary, with I think it was his uncle, when he was in Chicago and stuff, and so he'd seen dead bodies, he'd seen burials, and he dug graves and all this other
timer.
stuff.
Oh, okay.
Pause.
You gotta switch the
Just gotta stop
camera,
and start a
guys.
camera
This
real
is
quick,
actually a good
guys.
chance for us to, Marcia, any comments or thoughts or something that you want to mention or throw out?
This is no space on the memory
About
card.
Yeah, just.
about the book?
Oh, I mean, I thought you were monitoring chat. So.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was. Sorry, I was like, what? We got a lot. We got a lot of highs. Some
Is the
highs
audio
and
okay?
lows. Nobody's complaining about the
Good,
audio.
because this camera's freaking the hell out.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Yeah. It says there's no space on the memory card, which doesn't make any sense.
We can start from the
Wow.
beginning, huh?
Alright, well, never mind that. Looks like it's the live version is going to be it.
There you go.
You're seeing us live. Seeing us
I mean,
live.
I'll be able to still add the audio later to this
Yeah,
camera
yeah.
angle, so it's not a big deal, but yeah, we're going to have to figure out why that happened. So.
But yeah, I guess I'll just jump back to the point that I was throwing out then, and the fact that he was very accepting, and death was like just a natural thing, and it is whatever. And yet his wife, she had been so traumatized by the stuff with her sister that it was something she almost didn't even want to talk about and wanted to ignore as being such an essential part of life and grieving and everything that it is. And then you've got his daughter's perspective where she is learning about death and how a child deals with it, and the bitterness and the acceptance, and just the I don't know how she's numbed to Gage near the end of it and stuff. Just seeing her grieving process was just saddening. I think I can see why you might not find this as frightening, because in a lot of ways it's like gothic drama with horrific elements in it, because it's not gore heavy, it's not even like really death heavy, it's more of that unsettling, just spiraling, and in some cases building
It is,
as well.
building off what you're saying, it's a normal anxieties of death. Normal, like they don't live in a war zone. They don't live in an extreme society where death is part of everyday life. But it's a kind of normal way of just realizing that death is part of everyday life. Even if you just have you go to your job, you do your normal thing, death is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's kind of dealing with that, and you have to deal with that for yourself, for your spouse, for your children. That's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it takes those anxieties and just builds off of them.
Mhm.
I wanted to touch on what you were saying about Rachel Lewis's wife,
Mm-hmm.
about how dealing with her sister's death, because she was pretty much driven to madness. Like when she talks about her sister finally dying, she didn't know if she was crying or laughing. So that kind of touches upon like the giddiness and like
once you're
driven,
past that point.
yeah, past the point that it's almost, you know, death and being insane, like it is almost fun.
It's an extreme emotion. Sometimes there's a thrill in that.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, just the unbelievability suddenly becoming funny, and I mean, yeah, that's the definition of insanity for sure. I personally think that what makes this book so scary for me is just the depth of evil that they describe, and the fact that I was raised very religious, you know, Reformed Baptist. My dad's a Bible teacher, so I was like subsect of a subsect of a subsect, Reformed Baptist Christian, and so just the descriptions of how ancient this evil could potentially be, predating ideas of the Christian God and things of that nature. That's the kind of stuff that just terrifies me more than anything. It's just the suggestion of the span and the magnitude of the evil and how ancient the evil could be.
That's something in the Dark Tower too. It talks about in the Americas that there were people there before, even the Native Americans.
And there's a reason the Micmacs left too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Case,
There was something there before even people came there, even the ancient people.
Yeah.
And that's something in Stephen King, that there was something before.
Mm-hmm. It's a theme he's run with it and with lots of ones. Yeah, jeez, yeah. That stuff scares me immensely. And I mean, something they didn't do in the film was just the behavior of the resurrected and how much more with it they kind of are. I mean, we're talking straight up Exorcist shit with some of the stuff, like the stuff that is said to Jud, you know, about his wife. And I mean, like, fuck Scots in hell and stuff like that. It's
so
like,
did
oh
that
my god.
happen in the movie then? You said the confrontation? None of that happened, huh?
No, the resurrected are
I think
more
that's what
just
really-
innocent and dumb and kind of,
Yeah, because I think that's what really like set in the whole spirit. Sorry, I was reading on the comments, so I didn't hear if you touched this, but like really set in the evil, because it wasn't Gage that came back. It was this evil that came back. It got a hold of Gage, and he confronted Jud about it.
Well, in the movie though, it does become different things, because when Rachel sees Gage for the first time, she actually sees her sister. So it is almost like kind of how the book is, with it being like an entity that like feeds on your fears, feeds on like all of the sins that you've created over the years, and so I don't know. I think that it does touch on it a little bit, but like not how the book touches on it. So.
And it's something that also appears a lot in King is death not being like a nice thing. Like when you do die, there's this whole Judeo-Christian idea of going to heaven and it's rest. Like, no, there's evil when you get there. And like if you've read Revival, the ending of that
it's in my top 10. I love Revival.
That book the ending is fucking brutal.
We dropped some profanes. We're live streaming.
It's brutal. Like, and then it's like, oh, this is what death is. It's not a release. It's not a rest. When you do pass on, you move on to this horror that is beyond your reckoning. And that kind of pervades a lot of Stephen King's work.
We're in like the most terrifying Toad Ash, like eternally, and who knows what the hell is out there. But it's crazy.
But it's not good.
I want to interrupt you just real quick, because there's like a question from Blue Gilead.
Yes,
Gilead.
Blue, what is up, man? Shout out to
you-
Sematary Dance and their whole crew.
And I think we touched on it, but I think this really clarifies. Do you think the spirit behind the burial ground caused Gage's death, or do you think it just capitalized on it? We hinted around it.
Capitalized, I think.
I would see maybe a mix of both, because I do feel like it was one of those, like, you know, all the cards start falling once the initial spark hits, and I mean, I do feel like there was a frightening force pushing so many different event after event, you know, into being, and you know, once it got enough momentum, it just kept going and kept going. I mean, this is described as God of all dead at one point, you know, this particular presence, this essence, and it's something even bigger than what the Micmacs called the Wendigo. One thing that I actually Blue, I have to give a shout out to none other than the writer of Road to the Dark Tower himself, Mr. Bev Vincent. When I was reading his afterword in the 30th anniversary edition that was put out, he basically put forth a very interesting idea in the fact that he thinks that when you went over the deadfall, and that's what I think it was called, was the deadfall.
Deadfall, right?
Yeah. So he proposed that they were basically stepping through a thingy or a portal of something and going into another dimension. That's the reason not a ton of people had discovered this area. That's the reason you didn't see from some aerial view like strange rock formations or whatever for this dirty rock heavy soil ground. I actually thought that was a brilliant proposition because based on the energy that they were feeling, I mean when Lewis is just talking and internalizing just how jazzed and energized he felt every time he went over the deadfall and actually got into this place that felt like another world. I mean, you're trudging through a foggy, like swamp type area.
And the time change
almost.
too. He thought he was gone way longer than he actually was.
Yeah.
So it was like the whole like dissolution of loss of time.
Yeah. Yeah, frightening stuff. I mean, it's theories like that in my, at least for me, just like up the ante of the scare factor here.
I think
and
the
stuff.
entity, maybe not causing it, but knew it was going to happen. Anyway, it has a knowledge beyond what we have in our time, in our dimension, basically. Like, it knew Gage was going to die, and it was waiting for it.
Yeah. There's a little bit of that, but then also you have to remember, like, the truck driver was saying that, like, he felt abnormally wanting to drive at a faster rate than he normally did. And, and how he just couldn't stop.
Well,
like he saw Gage coming to his road, but he couldn't stop, and like something was pushing him towards it. And the same thing with Gage. When he looked backwards and he saw that the worry and the fear in their face, he kept going forward, even though like Lewis was saying he looked like he wanted to stop, but he couldn't stop. Something was pulling him, and he just missed him from. And I just feel like there has to be some sort of power there, or it could have been an illusion because there's a reconstruction, so it could just be how he perceives it. But I mean,
even in the third act though, where Jud just feels compelled to fall asleep when he knows just the importance of
he was lulled to sleep.
Yeah, he was, and same with like what the Rachel falls asleep too, right? Like at the wheel, or kind of like
Something
so,
kept pushing her from getting there.
after she drives past Jerusalem's Lot, which was another little nod that they put in there. So yeah, this was when he was his biggest at the world building, and I mean as terrifying as can be. I think I've at least hit the predominance of my notes. I personally think this is the greatest horror story of all time. That was something that I wrote as I was getting when I was getting to the tail end of it, and I mean forces beyond even ancient and stuff. I mean, this is all stuff that I've touched upon, but I guess this just plays to my fears very much so, and that's why it's so effective. And I guess for King, the fact that he was pretty much writing his family as a story, that's probably, I still think it's his most personal book as far as like a reflection of his family, because he's put writers in stories, he's had some family stuff in a few stories here and there, but I feel like this was the most personal and accurate reflection of his family at that time, and that's why he just wasn't feeling able to deal with it, and that's why he locked it away.
No, I agree. I really wish I would have read this prior to having a kid, because I feel like it might have had a completely different experience with how I related to Louis Creed and how I related to Rachel and Jud, and might have, I don't know what that would feel like without having that extra like tug at the heartstrings, knowing that that there is a possibility to experience that one day. And I think I know you have written down there. Have we touched on the funeral too? Because I thought the funeral was
that. I don't know. I felt like in the movie they did it justice.
I think so too.
I
To a degree. I mean, they didn't expand the scope of how he was feeling internally, especially where all the grievers are coming by, and he was like, "Yep, I had 10. He's in a better place. I had 20. At least he's not suffering, and it happened quickly." And I mean, when they were going through all of those, I've been in situations of losing loved ones, never with someone this young though, so I can't imagine just the magnitude of the hurt that would
And
hit.
But the
But-
imagery was there though,
Mhm.
with the fight breaking out and
You
then
felt like
knocking-
you were right
knocking
there.
over the
Knocking the
The
casket
casket.
almost
Oh my
falls
That was
off.
all in the movie. That was
Yeah.
all in the
Oh,
movie.
when
Yeah.
oh, the casket falls over
Oh,
and oh my
You sees the
god.
hand.
Oh my
hand,
god,
yeah,
I
yeah.
cried.
That,
Cried.
I think that's the most potent image in the movie, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
I
all
just-
the horror stuff in the movie,
yeah, just
that
how
is the really
hysterical
most
everyone
horrific
was in
one.
the movie.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know. Even that scene, like even though I've seen the movie several times, I watched it right before we were going to do the panel,
Yeah.
and like like I got teary eyed because it's
Mhm.
just so effective.
Yeah. Just
So,
seeing a little.
Yeah.
And that's going back to those.
I'm gonna go home and hug my baby. I don't care if he's asleep. I'm gonna
And that's
hug
going
him.
back to those very human fears, and that's
Mhm.
even taking away the supernatural horror of it,
Mhm.
just the actual horror
Yeah.
of the death of losing a loved one.
Yeah.
And that's just a very real thing that everybody has to experience
Yep.
in their life.
And I do love the line. Sometimes dead is better.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many great
Oh.
lines in this. I mean, I
Yeah.
had a few written down. It's oh goodness, one that speaks to me. Where the hell did I put it? God is much more generous with pain.
Yeah.
That was one that just really, really struck me thoroughly, and it kind of epitomizes the cynicism of this book. And I think that's another reason why King may not like this, is because it is a very dark and cynical
It
book
is.
in its outlook. You know, in its entirety, really, it is truly just a downward spiral that it just makes you feel bad. It's
I think
very
at the time it was King very.
On-
It was in the
Oh,
early
it was-
stages of his drug addiction as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think
Well, he was the
this
king of the world. In '83, he put out 3 movies. You know, this is where he was on his throne, and he was at the height of his popularity, at least at the time, where he had reached his apex. He kind of plateaued, I think, and
And
so.
this is when the Bachman books came out as well.
Yep, exactly. The
And that
revelation
questioning of success.
Yeah,
basically.
the whole
reached
revelation
it and
was
didn't know how to
happening.
deal with it, and
Yeah,
went to a really dark place
Mhm.
because he got so successful. I think
yeah.
that there came a certain darkness and a certain cynicism out of that. It's just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
if I could achieve this, then maybe it's not worth what it is if I can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, which is a ugly way of thinking, but very real. I mean, I probably think that too if I got into that.
The
that place.
cynicism of
Yeah.
success, the jaded aspect.
Yeah, if
of
I
it.
could do this, then maybe it's not that great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there's definitely influences from. I mean, he draws probably the most inspiration from the Monkey's Paw in this. I think it's about just you can't right a wrong with just being so deliberate and so selfish in a lot of ways. I think if I just want to have one last passing thought before I toss it to you guys to say if you had anything else from the book you want to mention before we just jump into the films real quick and looking forward. The Lazarus stuff, especially for me with the Christian upbringing, the fact that what pre-headed each of the portions was bits about Jesus going to resurrect this friend of his. That's just something else that was like icing on the cake and just hitting home. And the fact that he paraphrases the particular gospel that he references there of the 4, but I mean they're like he's been dead for days, then the body will smell, the flesh will be decaying, and all this different stuff. And that's just stuff that really just nailed the point of just frighteningness. So much, so much more to me. I guess the whole dead is better that plays into that. So, is there anything else before we jump into a quick film discussion that you guys want to mention? Or
Nope.
have we hit? Yeah, we
We're getting close to time.
hit the
So.
predominance of the points. Okay. So I guess since Marcia hasn't seen the 1989 film, directed by Mary Lambert, I still think in a lot of ways the film does hold up, and I feel like there's certain pieces that are effective. The bit with Gage is effective for me. I actually thought that they did a great job with the runner, especially with like the practical effects on his torn up head and everything, and his performance was properly chilling for me. And I mean, especially later on in the film when you don't really see him anymore, but and this is in the book as well, where he's where where Preet's daughter is just starting to have these dreams, and Paxton, he's appearing in the dreams, and he's warning her, and he's telling her it's too late, and all this other stuff. I thought the performances in this film were actually all fairly solid, and there's been some really...
Fred Gwynne
He's great, yeah.
That's an iconic performance in this film. Like, he's, Fred Munster, and he's this character.
Mm-hmm.
I think
He's most known for.
He's this character.
Yeah, especially if you're like... There's so many South Park fans who probably have no idea. Israel, and all that stuff, and just it's been sent up so much in pop culture that.
But he so perfectly just walked out of a Stephen King novel, and walked out of just small town Maine,
big lovable,
being this lovable, but there's a darkness to it. He knows about the darkness.
Yeah,
and just such a fantastic performance. And,
I still think Dale Midkiff as Creed was pretty good. He emoted very well in his expressions and
the
his
child
grief
actors
and everything.
in the film, I thought were with Ellie, the daughter. There were twins actually, but only one of them got credit for some reason.
Oh wow! So he didn't marry Peyton actually. Okay.
yeah.
But didn't get credit for it.
But I thought they were really good too. She was very convincing as a child actor, and just being a child with all the weird questions that children will ask.
Yeah, and also as young as Nico Hughes was, Cecil, when he had this performance to do, I mean, craziness. He really sold it and sold the sadness when he actually does it. That's, like I said, that's a scene that I thought was effective. Was there any that you think were adequately representative, at least? I mean, everyone talks about Zelda. That's one that comes to mind for me.
Zelda was okay. The problem is the book is scarier than the movie at the end, because when you see the doll that he's wrestling with in the hallway at the end, it's just silly, So it's not scary in the least to me. I thought the execution of the Mommy, I have something to show you was way better in the book than in the movie. And so,
although Jud's death, they cranked it up a little bit, with cutting the Achilles tendon and everything, and
but that's kind of an easy everyone's going to respond to that, because there's just a visceral reaction you're going to have to scenes like that.
Yeah, the way that Mary Lambert had him dressed up and stuff, though, I know you were critical of it, especially Cecil. Like, why is he dressed up like some little doll with the top hat and everything?
What the fuck was that? That was like out of nowhere for no reason that he was dressed up like
that's what they buried
fucking
him in?
1930s doll. Like,
well, there's that
Donald Duck.
There's that giant painting.
The Donald Duck, for real.
There's a giant painting that's at Rachel's parents' house. That the baby is wearing that same outfit.
It's trying to reference something, but still.
Right. It does look
when you see it
silly.
That's the biggest problem I have with the movie as a whole, is that the last act is it plays as silly, where in the book you can feel like the horror of it, but in actually seeing a little kid running around with a knife, like that's not that scary.
That's only stuff that to me is silly though, because like when he's carrying Rachel's body wrapped up in the sheet and everything, and he's just trying to rationalize to himself, it's just because I waited too long with Gage, and we waited too long with church, blah blah blah. If I do it right away and everything, obviously that scene is more effective in the book because he burns down Jud's house beforehand and all this different stuff. But I mean, he
burned down the house in the movie.
It's been a minute since I've seen the movie, so I cannot that part I forgot, I guess. But King changed the ending a little bit because he had that little tack on at the end, which the ending of the book leaves it up to mystery.
Right.
And he basically spelled it out.
Right.
Where you see the knife behind the back and you hear Lewis scream at the end, and I don't know. I have mixed thoughts about that. I thought the look of Tasha Yar was awesome when she came out, and the squirting from the eye and everything, and the flesh being messed up on the side of her face and everything. But I don't know. Who thinks that was a better ending, selling it and actually confirming it, or do you think just the ambiguity of the original ending is better?
I would have preferred the ambiguity. I like that better. I mean, the other one is more horror movie, I guess.
It
but
is more 80s horror movie.
Yeah,
sure.
but I think it was more impactful, kind of not knowing. What does she say? She just says, "Sweetie," or so, "Darling." Yeah, that's it.
Oh, and when they're kissing and stuff, it's so gross, dude.
I mean, in the book, that's all.
Rob just referenced that kissing part. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but he's like, "Kiss, gross, puss."
So I mean, it's I would have preferred the ambiguity. Yeah.
You know, I enjoyed it because that was the first time I saw Pet Sematary, that I knew about Pet Sematary. So
Same here.
I knew that ending before I knew the book's ending, and so I liked that ending. I liked it where like he thought that like it was gonna work out, but no, it ends up that it's never going to work out.
That's the theme of the book. It's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Like I told you 2 weeks ago, dead is better.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
called forcing the issue.
Sorry.
So
Sorry.
I don't know. I liked it, and that kiss is sickening, but like it's perfect because it just adds to his madness. That,
Mhm.
like he's willing to like just continue to love like this undead, creature pretty
Yeah.
much. But soon enough he's gonna die too.
Yeah.
Who knows though? Like I kind of want to go into Pet Sematary 2.
I rewatched it. I did a Hail to Stephen King retro review. It's a film series I've been doing called Films That Forgot the Face of Their Father, and so that's what I've been called.
That's pretty great.
Because I did Pet Sematary 2. I just did the Rage Carrie 2. I did a Return to Salem's Lot.
Have you
So
done the Sometimes They Come Back?
I
There's
did
like
all.
3 of those.
I did the 2 sequels, including the one that's got Burt Gummer from Family Ties in it. What's his name? The actor Cecil. His name is eluding me. I'm forgetting.
But who knows? Maybe undead Rachel would bring back Lewis, and then they would be an undead couple.
So she would kill him and then carry him to the
And then they
That's
go
the
to
sequel I would have
Halloween.
preferred.
Then they go to Halloween Town and make Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
So Kristopher, do you think that change to the little tack on to the ending? Do you think it was overkill?
I think like what we mentioned, it was very much an 80s horror movie move. Like
Yeah.
that's my issue with the movie as a whole, was that I've said this before, I think because Stephen King wrote the screenplay
He did.
to the film, and Stephen King is not the best at adapting his own work.
Mhm.
Like I think he's a brilliant novelist, but as a screenwriter, he has some issues. I think some of the best, all of the best Stephen King works were done by someone else.
And he does when they're good. He gives
Yeah.
credit where credit's due in those
Yes.
cases. Yeah.
And that,
Why
and the
did
ones
he create that character, Missy Dandridge? Like
Well,
she's such a
well,
throwaway character.
I thought she served a place in the story, but yeah, just he's not his that's not his form. He's not a screenwriter. He's a novelist, and but sometimes
Although I do think, as you mentioned, Storm of the Century is pretty damn
that's
good.
what I was about to say.
It
is,
kind of meanders around.
but that wasn't based on anything he worked on before. That was
good
a
point
new,
where he's writing
yeah.
something original for screen
like
instead of
Creep
adapting a
Show.
book.
I love Creep Show to
Same.
death.
Yeah.
And that was again like some of them were sort of based on some short stories ish, but like
the Crate and the Lonesome Death of the one that he starred in.
Yeah. Jody Verrill.
Jody Verrill.
Yeah.
There you go.
But when he's adapting his own work, he's not the best person to do that.
Mhm.
And I thought he was writing that to be an 80s horror. Well, at the time, just
Yeah.
a horror movie, and it kind of lost some of the.
I'm gonna give them what they want.
What made the novel more timeless? I think he was trying to go for the trends of the time
Mhm.
in horror movies at the time.
Yeah. Well, Pet Sematary 2. Marcia, I'm guessing if you haven't seen Pet Cemetery, I haven't seen Pet Cemetery 2.
Well, before you do that, someone going nuts on here wants you to say hi, Fuego specifically, to say hi to Trent Davis.
What's up, Trent Davis? Thanks for tuning in. Gracias.
Okay, I did my best.
There you go. Yeah, gracias to everybody who's tuned in for this. Thank you so very much. We do have to hit the finish line very soon because Marcia is on limited time. But Pet Cemetery 2, I know you didn't rewatch it before this, right? Yeah. Do you remember much about it?
Nope.
Besides, okay, well we can speed through this. It's got Eddie Furlong. It's got a pre-ER Anthony Edwards, I believe his name is. Clancy Brown though steals the show in this movie for me for just how over the top ridiculous he is as the resurrected sheriff. I mean, there's some beats in this movie that are fun. It wasn't as terrible as I remembered it when I reviewed it a month
I
or
think
so
it's
ago.
a fun movie.
It's good. It's got some. Oh, of course. How could we have something without an appearance from Table Cat? Hells yeah. But I don't think performances are that bad in it. It gets the climax is crazy bonkers, dude. Like seriously up in the attic, and the wife and everything, or the mother who dies at the very beginning of the movie, the actress, and
what I thought was interesting was Sheriff Gus,
Mhm.
like how
That's
he started
brilliant.
killing people and then burying them to bring them back. So he
Mhm.
almost like was like starting to
Making
create
a posse.
an undead posse.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that
It's
he,
ridiculous.
Situation.
Maybe he just wanted to kill people, but didn't want to go to prison.
no,
So he
but
buried
no,
them.
he
So
He
they-
doesn't kill in it, like the other family members and stuff. He's like sitting at the table eating food and everything
Yeah.
and laughing. The scene where he has spitting all the food out, he's like ha 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 ha, ha
Yeah.
spilling all over. It's
And I
got
love
a
it how
dark humor to it.
I love it how
guess.
his stepson was like liked him better
When he's dead,
when
yeah.
he was dead.
Sometimes
He's like-
Dad's not better apparently. 'cause
He's
the
like,
asshole
yeah, I feel like
stepfather."
we're a real family now. He's actually nice. He let me have seconds
Yeah.
at dinner time. And then I also loved all the little hints at like the original Pet Sematary.
Yeah, they
with,
gave some nods.
Yeah, that with the campfire story, telling the story of Pet
Mhm.
Cemetery, talking about
And the
Ellie.
taxidermist, right? Doesn't he make
Oh,
mention?
he
of-
makes mention of church.
Yeah.
And then also, I liked it how they tell the story of like Ellie and how she goes insane
Mm-hmm.
after her whole family dying, and
Wouldn't you?
walking in and just seeing that, yeah.
so and then how the bully like makes her out to be like this killer that comes on Halloween and kills people.
Those
and stuff
bullies
like that.
were so trope-tastic, early 90s, like kind of rock dudes picking on the nerd, kind of new kids and all that stuff. But it's a movie that's not as bad as I remember, but it's definitely not good by any stretch of the word.
It's
the
far
fact-
removed from the Stephen King original. It's a fun, I guess it was early 90s, but still like
92,
80s,
yeah.
80s style.
Yeah. It was like right after T2, and they're like, let's get Eddie Furlong for it, man.
But there was quite a bit of gore in that one.
It was gorier, I think, than the original film.
Yeah,
I mean, and
definitely.
Mary Lambert came back to direct, and she's never really directed much since then. Besides those two movies, so.
She's done some TV stuff.
And that
Little
car
bit there.
accident too. When, like,
Where his friend and the mom die on the highway and everything.
yeah, when Gus like pretty much drives them into
Mhm.
that.
He forces them
forces
over
them
to
over
head on
and-
traffic.
Yeah, and gets hit by that truck. That
Yeah.
was such a brutal scene.
Yeah, so it's not terrible. It's not as terrible as you may think it is, but it's certainly not good. So as we hit the finish line here, we actually have a remake to Pet Sematary that's coming April 5th, 2019. It's being directed by the team of Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmeyer. They did a movie that impressed the hell out of me called Starry Eyes. And I was totally against this remake because I'm one of those that holds the original very sacredly in my heart. And I don't think it's definitely of the era, but I think it's one of the stronger Stephen King adaptations. It's
But
not
again,
one of the
The
best.
idea of it's a remake.
Yeah,
I mean, the
It's like a
novel is out there
reinterpretation,
and
yeah.
is a better, like,
and never be taken
can
away
you call
from
that
us.
a remake? Is
Yeah.
when it's another version of a
Mhm.
novel, which is the definitive version of that story.
Obviously, and it always will be. But I'm curious about what Different Eyes and maybe something more faithful
Starry Eyes?
to the dark aspects of the book. Starry Eyes goes to some dark ass territory, man. Seriously, who on the panel has seen Starry Eyes?
Yeah, I've
Me.
seen that.
Yeah, it's I mean, think
I
of
have my
like
issues with it, but
yeah, think of like Harvey Weinstein times like Satanism, I guess, or something. I don't know. It's
Wow.
pretty
I thought
nuts,
How do you
Kinda-
gauge that?
spoilers
Gauge
for that
that.
movie, but
yeah.
I thought the last act kind of lost it a little bit.
A little bit.
I thought it turned into, oh, she's crazy now, she's gonna kill people.
Mm.
And the first hour of it, I thought was incredible, like really atmospheric and suspenseful. And then
Yeah.
it was just like, here's some kill scenes.
Yeah, it kind of needed
And
to go
they were
where
bad
it
kill
wanted to
scenes.
go.
It was just like,
But
yeah,
there's some tense, unsettlingly directed scenes in that, and I'm on board with seeing a different
Yeah.
vision of this, and even more so once they started announcing people. I really liked John Lithgow, that casting of him as the new Jud, and I'm actually cool with
Really,
the-
most people hate John Lithgow. That's so surprising. No, not the same. Who doesn't love John Lithgow?
Yeah, and I can almost hear him saying the lines in my head, although, to be fair, I think Michael C. Hall might be the definitive, voice of the character for me at this point, but let's see what Lithgow does, and I do like Jason Clarke a lot. He's talented beyond Terminator Jenny Smith. I attest to that, and they actually just cast this lady who I'm not as familiar with as Rachel. Her name is Amy Seimetz. She's got a ton of work, but she was most recently seen in Alien Covenant. So she's a She's a respected actress, and
No,
yeah,
she's good. She's
yeah. So we are just a little less than a year away now at this point. April 5th, 2019. We have reached our limit of time, guys. So there's not going to be like an extensive questionnaire at the end. We ended up talking the most about the novel, which makes the most sense because that's it's the
The
definitive.
meat potatoes.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it for our Pet Sematary 35th anniversary panel discussion that was delayed by Phoenix Comic Fest.
Yeah.
But thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
Derek Aaron.
Kristopher Smith.
Marsh Parker.
Gracias a Jaime and Fuego. And if you share this video, make sure to tag the horror show and use the hashtag Hail to Stephen King. And thanks again.
All right. Thanks very much. And remember,
Stay
scared.
I look forward to reading all of events